Josh, good afternoon slash fake good morning, because we always have coffee here.
We just like coffee too much just because we're salespeople, I guess. Black coffee's our thing.
What's new in the world of AI and recruitment?
I actually had a really interesting conversation this weekend. So I was chatting with my wife's cousin, and they're like a very technical engineer. So they do like structural engineering work, and they travel around the world and do a bunch of fixes for Navy boats, which is super cool. And so he's going through the process of finding a new job right now, just trying to find something new. And so he had a really interesting experience using AI on a screening call. And so obviously my eyes lit right up and I was like, do you mind if I like absolutely bombard you with questions to understand like what that experience was like? And he's like, no, like let's talk about it. So him and I had a couple of chats over some drinks just to get a general understanding of the experience. And for context, this was like the first call in his process that it was used. So he had just applied, was getting ready to get for the call, and then the way they had it set up was a AI screening platform that you would basically log into. It would track all of your keystrokes. It can track what you're searching online, and it tracks it whether you delete things or add letters or any corrections you make. So it's just like everything that you're doing, it's tracking. Okay. The other side is that they were like, it is an open quiz. So you're more than able to go and make Google searches and things like that, but we're tracking any of the searches that you make. So it's not like it's a bad thing to go search, but your recruiter could have the ability to see what you're searching for. And so he was going through, finishing up this assessment, and then sent it in. I was just like, how did it feel? Like, what was it like? And the biggest things that I heard from him were that it felt really weird, the fact that everything was tracked, everything, which does make sense. And the other thing that he mentioned to me is that he didn't have any like attachment to that company after the interview because he didn't meet anybody. And I know that's one of the big things that you and I have talked about before, Ryan, where it's like a big part of my opinion, that initial screening call, the initial call with somebody, it's like, who are you? What are you about as a human? Like, what motivates you? What makes you excited to get up in the morning? Why are you even interested to come over here? Like, roll aside, like, what are you about? And I think one of the things that he was mentioning to me was that because he didn't get to engage with anybody from the company, it actually turned him off from that specific role he was looking at because there's no context to who he might be working with or what the opportunity might look like, and it didn't have that human connection to it. So that part was really interesting, and I chatted about some other stuff as well, but I'm curious from your initial thoughts. Does that surprise you at all?
What was it, 3 episodes ago? We both said that I think there's a place for it in the application. So I don't even think this company is using it incorrectly from like, because it sounds like it was kind of like an assignment, like a quiz. So it doesn't sound like the company used it incorrectly. I think the order of operations around the sequence of when they used it could have been more thought out, where, hey, to apply, you need to do this short AI powered quiz.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I'm feeling like I'm doing an application. I'm feeling like I'm doing something self-service
Mm-hmm.
for the opportunity to potentially speak with someone.
Yeah.
Like that makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Or, hey, I've already met the hiring manager, I've met the team. I got to ask some of my questions to make sure it's a right fit for me. Now I'm bought in to do further diligence with that hiring manager to let them vet me out a little bit more to make sure I can get this role.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the disconnect in my mind is like if you're just seeing a company's website and a job description, I'm not bought in on the role yet. I still need to ask specific questions to make sure things align. And it sounds like they didn't give him the opportunity to do that, which is where I think they went wrong, not necessarily using it, the AI for that assignment.
I 100% agree. Because I was even asking, and I can't remember the specific details of the question right now, but they were much more like early interview questions. Where, because I even asked them a follow-up
Okay.
question. I was like, hey, like, what if they were more like assignment based? Like, it was like, hey, in a situation like this, what would you do? Could that change your perception of actually going through that experience? And he said 100%. So I do think when we were looking at it from more like the assignment or like application based aspect, like a testing phase, I think it could be a really interesting way to do it because then there's no bias that AI could even bring in. It's just, here are the answers. Now you get to engage with somebody going through it like an AI avatar. and then go. But the other really interesting thing that he mentioned to me is that when he was on the call, he was just staring at a screen of himself. So they didn't have like an avatar or like something that he could feel like he was talking to throughout that process. I also thought that was very interesting too, because he said that if there was any sort of avatar or something that he felt like he could engage with, it would have also made it feel like a much more natural process versus just staring at himself on his screen, which I also thought was really interesting.
I just don't know how that like AI interviewing someone is actually going to play out. Like, I don't think that's the right area for it because, again, it's a mutual conversation.
Yeah.
I think an interesting idea is for companies to provide almost like a GPT of like, hey, common questions of the role where they feed all the necessary information that can be like front facing about the role. Say, hey, before the interview, feel free to ask us any questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like a collaborative thing. Like I could see that being helpful there.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we need to think about the candidate experience here because there's ways to implement AI to improve your efficiency. And that company is probably improving their efficiency. But the brand blowback from it.
I personally feel like some really interesting areas that the AI can start getting brought in throughout the interview steps process to our conversation. Again, an assessment phase I think makes a ton of sense. I think another area that I know is very time consuming for a lot of recruiters is actually helping people practice before interviews. And so one of the things that we always do at HubSpot is our recruiters would meet with any candidates a couple days before, the day before, and be like, hey, like, here's kind of like a role play of the situation or whatever that might be, right? And even using AI in those situations, I think could be so interesting because, I mean, from a sales perspective, I'm already seeing like AI cold calling tools and things like that. So you can actually practice and role play. And that might be really interesting as well, is just using it more from like a practice standpoint. So recruiters don't have to spend their time always going through like the practice phases. But to your point, I feel like a really big aspect for the candidate throughout those interview experiences, getting to meet somebody from the role that they're going to work for. That's their first interaction with your business. And I think that's something that has to be a human experience because it's a human looking to work for another human's company. Yeah. Or
a recruiting firm, right? Like a recruiting firm, like you're that person that's going to advocate for their next role and be there to like have their back. This AI thing that they're talking to is not going to give them that same feeling. We need to really focus on what will drive efficiency while improving the candidate experience. And then if those two things have a big check mark beside it, then full speed ahead. If it's not making you more efficient, like why are you doing it in the first place? But even if it is making you more efficient, if it's creating a terrible candidate experience for half your candidates, you're not going to feel that tomorrow. You're going to feel that in 6 months. Yeah. Right? Everybody's going to talk about it. We're talking about this one, for example, on a podcast. So yeah, using AI, it really needs to be a win-win situation for both the candidate and the hiring team.
The whole idea of using AI for like front of office versus back of office work as well. And I think there's a lot of really easy applications for back of office work. And again, I'm wildly biased because that's what we do. But I feel like the front of office stuff is going to be a reality in the future. But I think it's, to your point, it's how do you balance it with keeping a great candidate experience while you're also having some of those time-saving aspects as well. And I don't know if there's any perfect way to balance that today, but I know that's why there's brilliant people out there who are going to help solve that problem as we're going through it too. Because I even think like in the same route, and this is actually a really interesting one from a conversation I had last week just on a call with a potential prospect, is actually using AI through like personality tests. And I also feel like that's really interesting because it's similar in the sense of what we were talking about for more of an assessment phase. So if obviously things like a Myers-Briggs test or insert name of test there, and just using AI for what it does best, which is just collect information, segregate, and make sure it's actually getting tracked appropriately too. I found an interesting article from like Hogan, just from AI personality tests. And so just some interesting things that they were talking about around using it throughout the different processes inside of your own recruiting process too. But I just thought, especially using it again from different test-based functions, is a really interesting way that I haven't heard a lot of other companies doing it yet, at least. Because I know even when you and I used to work at Vidyard back in the day, we were contemplating using like a personality-based testing as part of our interviewing process based on this like best reps that we had. And we did it for a couple of months. And I think we saw like a little bit of early feedback from it, but I remember that was a really interesting thing that we were doing. It obviously wasn't AI based, but it was still a really interesting way that maybe stuff can be added in and then using some sort of AI function in order to help bring up like the top talent. Because I don't think it should be used to make decisions. Not
I think
especially
more of
not
a
that, but
management tool.
yeah.
That's what I learned from that experience. Like
Mhm.
there were some people that were like, based on the personality test, like do not hire, do not like
Yeah.
they're our best reps, they're
Yeah.
best performers. So again, like there's a time and a place for everything, right? Like
Mhm.
it's not about what the tool, like you wouldn't use a hammer to put a screw in a wall, right? So I know that's a terrible analogy. Like
I'm just trying to imagine somebody flipping their hammer around and they're trying to turn it on
oh
the
yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think there's a lot out there right now, and it's just a matter of like what are those jobs that can drive efficiency gains that aren't going to negatively impact the candidate experience, and hopefully it actually positively impacts the candidate experience. But I love those two takes. That's awesome. Well, as always, Josh, appreciate you always bringing some cool insights, and we'll be back next week to talk more about AI in the world of recruiting firms.
We love it. Talk soon, Ryan.
See ya.